Hey everyone, we're going to graph the rational function y equals -5 divided by x plus 1. This is an introductory video, meaning it's based off that you haven't seen this before or you've just seen it a little bit. So basically, rational functions usually look something like this. You have two little branches like that. Sometimes they'll be like this. Sometimes they'll have more branches, so they might have something like this. So that kind of gives you an idea. This one's either going to look like this one or this one. So that gives us an idea of how we're going to graph this. Also, the branches of the graph approach lines called asymptotes. So we're going to find both the vertical asymptote and the horizontal asymptote and use those asymptotes to frame our rational function when we graph it. And then we're going to plot a few points to finish off the graph. So the vertical asymptote, and I'm going to put this negative with the 5 just so it's not confusing. All right, the vertical asymptote is merely where the denominator cannot equal 0. So basically, when you solve for x, you get x cannot equal -1. You plug in -1, you're dividing by 0, and it is undefined there. So that's your vertical asymptote, and it's pretty easy to find. So x equals -1. And again, it's a line. So now we're going to do the horizontal asymptote, and that one's a little more conceptual. So basically what it's saying here is that as x increases, what does my y get closer and closer to? And it's going to be an approximate value. So as x gets larger and larger, my y is going to equal some b. And I'll tell you what that means. So let's look at this. We have -5 divided by, and I'm going to put a big number in here. So I put 100 in there. That's 101. So that is pretty close to 0. And if you don't understand that, you want kind of an integer value if you can for this introduction part. If you want to test some more values, let's plug in 1,000,000. You plug in 1,000,000 because it says as x increases, you'll plug in this. And that's very obvious that this number is very, very close to 0. So that's what your horizontal asymptote is going to be. That's your b. Your b is the 0. So y equals 0. And again, it's a line. So let's plot the lines, and then we're going to pick some points to graph. So we had x equals -1 is a vertical asymptote. I do a dashed line because like a ghost line. So that's x equals -1. And my horizontal asymptote was y equals 0. So this is your new framework. Instead of graphing from starting at 0, we're going to do the start in this area. So this is -1. So what I'm going to do is plug in some points. I'll just go ahead and plug in 0. I want to see what's going on the right-hand side of x equals -1 and what's going on the left-hand side of x equals -1. So I plug in -1 here. Not -1, but 0. I'm going to get -5 divided by 1. So at 0, we're at -5. This is -5. All right. Let's plug in, this is at 0. Let's plug in 5. This is 5. If you plug in 5, you can get -5 over 6. Well, that's very, very close to 1, or -1. So let's just put that about 1. It's a little less than -1. And then you can plug in, let's plug in a point. Let's plug in 2. If you plug in 2, you get -5 divided by 3. So that's negative 1 2/3. So that's more in here. So what's happening is this looks like something like this. These branches get closer and closer to the asymptotes. You want to plug in more points, fine, but 3 is a really good number to plug in. So that's what's going on the x equals negative 1 line on the right. Now let's look and see what's going on the left. So let's plug in negative 2. If I plug in negative 2 here, get negative 5 divided by negative 1, that equals 5. So we go up to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And then you can plug in some more points. Let's plug in negative 6. So I plug in negative 6. I'm going to get negative 5 divided by negative 5 equals 1. So negative 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is negative, what do we plug in? Negative 6. And that went to 1. And then these two lines, this line should be symmetric to this line. You can plug in an extra line if you want. This should be symmetric-ish, and I'm just sketching it here. It's really hard to graph a perfect rational, but that's what it looks like. And it should be symmetric over this. And that's it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.